Hello, today I thought I'd take a look at this paint set which Paul Rubens kindly sent me, and it's the Qiaomei 24 watercolour set. I don't have a huge amount of information on this set. I'm not sure completely where it's aimed at, if it's student grade or artist grade, but we'll take a look at them. So it's got a cardboard wrapper with quite a bit of information on it. The colours come with a name and a number, and then there's Lightfast information in the form of these stars, though I couldn't find out how this has been tested. They all seem to be either 4 or 5 stars. And there's also pigment information, and looking through, out of the set of 24, 11 of them are single pigments, and then we've also got a square that's either filled in or open, which I'm assuming is transparency. So we've only got transparent or opaque classification, and 17 are transparent according to this. So we'll take a look at how that matches up later. Let's take a look inside. When I opened this in a recent art haul video that I did, the first thing I noticed was like a real subtle shimmer in the plastic. That's actually quite nice. And it feels like quite a nice little robust case. It feels like quite a nice quality. And it's 18 by 9 centimetres. So the paints themselves are covered up by this sticker. And that's all the same information that's on the back of the box. I'm going to stick it on some white paper, and I can keep that with it if I want to. And at the side there's this little kind of spatula and space for the spatula, and that's the only, well, there's a gap there so that you can take this little mixing tray out, and it's pretty sturdy. Yeah, it's not flimsy, it's quite nice. And then you've got some extra mixing space if you want it, I guess. And then there's slots at the top of each pan. So I'm not sure if these are stuck down. Okay, so the pans do pop out. There's no glue or anything in the bottom of them. Though I didn't manage to do it with a spatula. I used my trusty old knife in the end. So I've just got one of my new Sennelier half pans, and it's maybe the tiniest bit smaller, but yeah, that's a little bit shallower maybe. No, there's not much in that at all. It's a fairly standard half pan size. I'll swatch out the paints now, and I'm not going to pre-wet them. I want to see what they're like straight out of the pans. And this first one is Chinese white. It's not as opaque a white as titanium white, PW6. It's more of a mixing white. And in the painting I do at the end, I do mix a couple of the other colours with the Chinese white to soften them down and make them more into pastels. And next up is lemon yellow hue, which is PY175. I actually really like this yellow. It seems very transparent, and it's like a really clear, nice yellow. And it's the same pigment as Winsor & Newton's Winsor Lemon. Next up is cadmium yellow pale hue, and this is a mix of PY65 and PY175. I'll put water in the bottom half of the swatch boxes so you can see how the paint flows into it. and I'm putting an extra layer of paint across the top of the box. And this next one is cadmium yellow hue, and that's PY97 and PY65. And this one flows quite nicely. I'm doing this voiceover after I've swatched all of them, and I found that across the set most of them don't flow as well. There's maybe 2 or 3 which flow super well. I kept the palette on for the first few to show you how they re-wet, and I found they all re-wet pretty easily. This next paint is called Gamboge Hue, and it's PY153, which is actually the same pigment as my Jackson's Indian Yellow. It's a lovely, really transparent paint, though it doesn't flow very well. Then we've got Cadmium Red Pale Hue, and that's a mixture of PY65 and PY255. I don't know tons about pigment, but I did wonder if that was supposed to be PR255, which is the same pigment as Daniel Smith's Pyrrole Scarlet and A. Gallo's Vermilion Red. It's really quite a nice one and flows well too. Then there is Cadmium Red Hue, and that's PR149 and PR255. I'm not that much of a red paint fan, but I actually quite liked these reds in this set. This Cadmium Red Hue doesn't flow particularly well though. And the last one on this row is Cadmium Red Deep Hue, which is PR188 and PR254. My Snellier Red is a PR254 as well. One thing I did find with these 3 reds is that after they dried, there was a very slight sheen where the paint was thickest. I'm kind of feeling like overall these paints are student grade paints, although extremely good student grade paints. So next up is Permanent Rose, and it's PV19. It's a lovely transparent one, and you can see when I add the water that this one spreads quite nicely. This was another one that I did find dried with a slight sheen though afterwards. Then we've got Alizarin Crimson Hue, which is PR206. Again, it dried with a slight sheen, but as far as reds go, I really quite liked it. Then next up, I think, is probably my favourite paint in the set, and that's Purple Lake, which is PR88. But to me, it really looks like PV19. So it's very similar to Roman Schmoll's Quinacridone Violet or Rosa Gallery's Quinacridone Lilac. But a really, really pretty transparent colour. Then next up is probably my least favourite paint in the set, and that's Cerulean Blue Hue, and that's PB15. I just wasn't very keen on the consistency of it, and it just seemed a little bit chalky and sluggish. Then we've got Cobalt Blue Hue, which is PB29 and PW5, so just an ultramarine and white mix. Then is Ultramarine, which is PB29, and this does granulate somewhat when it dries. It's not heavily granulating though. Then we've got Intense Blue, which is PB15, and it feels like a pretty standard phthalo blue with a high tinting strength. The last one on this line is Indigo, which is a mixture of PB15, PBK9 and PB29. And I actually really like this mixture. It granulates a bit with the ultramarine in it, and I liked how it flowed and separated out a little bit. Then we've got Sap Green, which is PG36 and PO49. When this dried, I noticed a little bit of flocculation in it, so kind of little clumps of particles, but in a different way from granulation, which I'm not overly keen on, though it wasn't super noticeable. Then there's Hooker's Green Light, which is PB15, PO49 and PG7. And again, there was a little bit of this flocculation in it when it dried. Then there's Emerald Green, which is a mixture of PG7 and PY175. Though to me it just looked like a standard PG7 phthalo green blue shade. The greens all had pretty decent transparency. Then there's Burnt Sienna, which is PR101, and it doesn't have a super high tinting strength, but it was quite similar to Winsor & Newton's Burnt Sienna and A Gallows Transparent Red Oxide, which are both PR101s. Then there's Raw Umber, which is PBR7 and PY42 mix. And this hardly flowed at all. Then there's Van Dyke Brown, which is the coolest brown in the set, and that's PR101 and PBR7. And I actually really like this one. It kind of dried with a bit of interesting granulation. And this is Burnt Umber, which is PY42 and PBR7, so the same pigments as the Raw Umber. I should also say that I'm swatching on Canson XL watercolour paper. This is cellulose paper and the paint dries quite rapidly, and so you do get a fair bit of cauliflowering. And then the last paint in this set is Ivory Black, which is PBK9. So here they all are now that they're dry. You can see that on the whole they're lovely vibrant colours, quite transparent. Most of them don't flow very well, but when I do the painting next I find that they are really nice paints to work with, and I enjoyed myself with them. I also really liked using the palette. It just feels really stable and good quality, and I like the design of it. I wasn't really sure what I felt like painting to try out these paints, so I got a book out called Belle a Bio. I've only got it in French, by Maru Godas, whose art I absolutely love. And this is a book on making your own cosmetics and things from plants and natural ingredients. And I love this painting of fruit and vegetables on big platters, so I decided to use that as inspiration. And I figured I'd be able to use quite a few of the colours. When the paints have dried, I add some details with Caran D'Ache Luminance and Derwent Lightfast coloured pencils, and Holbein Soft White Artist's Pencil. So yeah, that was just a bit of fun with the paints. Overall, I'd say that they're a really, really good student grade watercolour set. They don't have quite the same quality as my professional watercolours, but they are nicely pigmented, they mix well together, and they're pretty transparent, which I like. And here's the palette now that I've used it. I really like this divided palette in the lid. And I also really liked having the separate pans with the black plastic in between them. Well, I hope that was helpful. Thanks ever so much for watching. Bye!